Okay, I am now recording, and this is the July Wyoming cohort. We're here with Cynthia and Ryan and Jessica, with me and Nan, and this is our second session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we're going to start with a question in the chat. I don't even need to put this on presentation mode just yet. Let's just go here for the time being. So if you would chat me where you are right now. Last month, I gave you an assignment to complete an initial thinking document. And if you have not done that yet, you're an A. If you've done it, well, you can read them. I don't need to read them to you. Let me know where you're at. Ryan. Okay, so Ryan, did you get a chance to watch the recording of the first webinar?
So to be brutally honest, because we all need to work in honesty here, I've seen about a quarter of it.
Okay, so I'm super glad you're here. And I am also going to suggest that you go back and watch the rest of that recording and do the first exercise.
Yeah, I definitely plan. I'm going to, just so you know. I know that sounds like a bad student.
No. Actually, I think this is the beauty of technology, right? This is the beauty of technology, is we're able to record them. We can watch them when it makes sense. You might have more time over Christmas break and you can do these things. No, not at all. But I'm just saying, like, if you're watching these recordings and you've skipped over some of the first recording and you didn't get a chance to do the initial thinking document, that is an exercise that I actually recommend. Cynthia and Jessica both did theirs, and we were talking earlier. Cynthia kind of said, in a way, it made me settle down a little bit having done that, just getting a chance to think through each one of those 24. And in a way, it made me feel a little anxious because I saw how many holes I have in where I don't have an example to fit, some of the 24 criteria. But here's the thing. It's okay for you to have reds. And Ryan, because you probably don't know what I'm talking about, what you're going to do is you're going to reflect on each one of the 24 portfolio criteria, and you're going to start brainstorming how you've met each one. And then you're going to color code your examples green if you think it's a really good, strong example of that. You'll color code it yellow if it's an example, but it's not a green, and then red if it's a whole. So I was telling Cynthia that it's perfectly fine to have reds right now. In fact, one of the key objectives of that assignment is to find your reds, is so that you are aware where you have some holes, because we're in month 2 right now, and this is the perfect time for you to go, okay, I have some reds and I can think about how I'm going to start addressing those over the next couple months. What gets really nerve-wracking is if you don't do this exercise, so you don't know where your reds are, and then 3 months from now, when you're scrambling to put your portfolio together and you're like, holy crud, there are 6 indicators that I don't even have an example for. That's bad. Having reds now is not bad. So I just want to preface that. Okay, Jessica, B.5. Yeah, that's kind of what Cynthia said as well. And did it sort of go along with what I just explained about, in a way I feel a little bit better, but in a way I was freaking out because I saw some reds?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was just, that assignment, kind of what you said, was pretty eye-opening. Cynthia and I, we went through it pretty thoroughly when we talked about it. It took us a lot longer than we thought to go through it. And, yeah, I feel it's hard because I feel okay about incorporating some of these things, but some of them I don't. So I think there's, depending on which part I feel
Yeah.
okay, and then some of it I'm like, ugh.
Let's, after the session today, depending on what time we get done and everyone's availability, if you want to, you know, ask some of those specific questions about some of those parts, I might be
Mhm.
able to help. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me go ahead and review a little bit. So last month, we talked about this 3-step process to developing a portfolio. And this isn't ISTE's official process. This is just like the world according to Leanne and what I've figured out from looking at so many portfolios, is that the very first step in this process has to be coming up with your examples. And that's why your first assignment was your first assignment, was to really reflect and see where you have good examples and where you do not have good examples. And a tip from last month's webinar, not even a tip, it was like, you have to do this, is you have to use that criteria guidelines document when you're reflecting on your examples. Because if you don't use that document, you may fall into the trap of thinking it means one thing and coming up with an example, but that's not actually what it means. So the criteria guidelines document is going to help you out. And I have a note here to remind you also, Jessica, this is for you right now. If you think there are some criterion that are red and you're like, I'm not really sure how I'm going to address this, I would invite you to think back to your module work. Well, even for ones that you do think you have good examples of, for everyone, I'm going to invite you to think back to your 9 weeks of online modules, because you did many things. For example, you wrote a lesson plan that either highlighted design thinking or computational thinking. And that is, if I'm not mistaken, because I'm not looking at it right now, is criterion number 21. I think it's one of the criterion. There are 4 digital citizenship criteria on the alignment map, and you did 2 application activities in your online module work, and chances are something fits in somewhere. If not, it might not be a ready-made artifact, but it might be an artifact or something to get you thinking about your practice to where you're 50% of the way there or 75% of the way there or something like that, because of the work that you did in the modules. What else did you do? You did a UDL lesson plan in the modules, right? So I would just invite you to think about those things as other examples when you do that first exercise. Okay, the second step in the process is, once you have good examples, you are going to have to articulate them clearly enough for an evaluator to be able to think that you have done a good job, A, understanding the criteria, and B, implementing it. We don't do the second step before we do the first step, because if it's not a good example, there's no use writing it clearly, right? So we have good examples, we write them clearly. Those are called the contextualizations, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then the third step in the process is asking yourself, how can I show evidence of my example? And that's going to be choosing or creating clear artifacts. That is going to be our topic for next month's webinar. Tonight, we're going to be talking about contextualizations. All right, we already just talked about this. The last session, we talked about misunderstanding the criterion. Let's answer a couple of questions. I did have some cohort peeps ask questions on the form. So someone asked, for number 13, which asks me to learn a new technology alongside my students, would it be appropriate to use a lesson where technology failed partway through and I needed to change to a different technology source and program partway through the final project? So what I'm going to do is I am going to go over to an alignment map. Actually, I'm going to go to the criteria guidelines document. That'll be even better. Because we want to start by looking at the criterion. And number 3, nope, not 3, 13 is co-learn. Come on. Co-learn with students about a new digital tool. That's the criterion. So the question is, would it be appropriate to use a lesson where technology failed partway through and I needed to change to a different technology source? So I'm looking back over here and I'm going to read these focus questions. And right at the beginning, it says, think of a time that you learned a brand new digital tool or resource with a group that you were instructing. So my direct answer to the question is, I don't know enough to tell you yes or no. So you've provided a good context. You said tech failed, so we had to switch directions. But my follow-up question to you would be, when you switched directions, was that a tool that was new to both you and your students? Did you co-learn that new tool together? Because if you switched gears to another tool that you already knew, that would not meet the criterion. This is really asking for you to be a learner right alongside your students with a new tool. Okay, so if we continue reading these questions, it asks about the process. So when you write your contextualization, not only do you want to provide that information of what you co-learned and verify that it was something new to both you and your students, but you would also want to talk about the process you used to co-learn with your students. Like, what did that look like when you co-learned? And that's where we begin thinking about the contextualization. So you first have your example, then you can use this to write about it. Did someone have a question? Okay, so my answer to that question is I'm not sure. It depends on if you knew that technology tool that you switch gears to. Okay, the second question that was asked is about criteria number 5 and 6, promoting a shared vision and advocating for equitable access in districts where those roles are generally taken on by a specific paid position. I feel like I would be stepping on toes in my district by doing too much in these areas simply because it is someone else's explicit job to do these things. So let's take a look here at 5 and 6. Now, please notice that 5 and 6 are both under the leader standard, okay? And I think I probably told you guys a little story about when we were developing these standards and how there was a lot of questions, even before these were ever published, when we were asking teachers for feedback, there were a lot of questions because teachers were saying, why is there a leader standard in the educator standards? I'm not a leader, I'm a teacher. I'm not a leader, I'm a teacher. And we as a group really discussed this, and the take on this standard is sort of this mindset of leading from every position. You may not have a specific title like principal or curriculum director or assistant principal or whatever that those positions are. You might not have that, but the idea in this standard is that we can all be leaders. So when we talk about promoting a shared vision, and let's specifically highlight the word promote here. So it might be that somebody else is responsible for setting the vision, right? But let's read this very first paragraph here on the criteria guidelines document. Does your school have a shared vision for digital learning? That's important, for digital learning. A shared vision is one you have with others, not your own vision. So in this criteria, you wouldn't say, well, I have this vision for my students, blah, blah, blah. No, we're looking for something that's at a higher level. So you don't have to be the one setting this vision, but it's asking, is there a shared vision? And then it's asking, how can you promote those visions to a larger audience? How does your vision connect to making digital learning and teaching more effective? So let's see, I went through, there was one example from a previous cohort member. She was a professional developer, and I'll just show you this example to give you a sense. There are many different ways you could do this, but I thought this was a pretty good way. So you can see, number 5, she starts off, historically speaking, our district has had a technology team that meets to discuss and recommend technology purchases. Well, I don't want to read this whole thing to you. Our overarching foci are built around 5 key strategies. Here there are. In working to embrace and exemplify our district's vision, I felt the first step would be to begin with referencing at the start of any and all interactions I have with staff, students, and stakeholders. Explaining how technology integration ties to our district vision can support our efforts and give meaning to the work we're doing each day. So basically, again, she is a professional developer for technology integration, but she's saying the way that I promote our district vision is I start every professional development grounding it in our district vision. And then her artifact shows evidence of that. So that's one way to think about it. Hopefully that helps. And then the second one that you asked about was advocate for equitable access. And I'm going to focus us on the word advocate in this example again, because, like you said, it might be somebody else's job to do some of those pieces that we might normally think about with equitable access. It might be a technology director or something like that. But this is really about you as a teacher leader and who you're talking to, or how you're advocating when you see a group of students at an unfair disadvantage. So look, here's how they word it. How do you encourage decision-making regarding equitable access? Now, I want to tell you on this one that equitable access does not necessarily mean just having a one-to-one program. We, in the last 6 to 8 months, have really shown a bright flashlight on the equitable access piece, have we not, with remote learning? And we know that there are gaps. There are students who don't have access or don't have access at home. There are these gaps. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about this. Is there a specific group of learners that has an unfair disadvantage in learning that access to specific technology can assist? Who has an unfair disadvantage that if they had technology, it could help them? And down here, it says unfair disadvantages may be on a number of different factors. Some people have said, well, this is really hard for me because I work in a, high SES school. But look, it could be that it's an unfair disadvantage based on gender. We know that sometimes there's an inequity in girls and boys participating in STEM, right? It can be any other learning factors. It could be a special education population. I've had participants tell me that their special education students don't have access to technology, and perhaps they're the learners that need it the most. So you identify that, and then you think about who you are talking to, how you are advocating for that group to have a more level playing field. So you don't have to be in a specific position to do that, but think about how you might help influence some of those conversations and some of those decisions. Okay, so I will just show you, oh my gosh, we are already at this time. Okay, hang on, let me just show you one example. We'll use the same one since we're already here. Advocate for equitable access. In a nutshell, what she says is she's worked directly with the director of IT to identify programs or services to bridge this digital divide of their underserved population, to bring more internet access at home. Then she goes on to say, this is important. This is really good. This was not an easy sell to my director or to other district leadership, because this actually really shows advocacy, right? Like, it's not that we all just agreed and moved on about creating this. It was like she really had to advocate. It wasn't an easy sell. The issue would always come back to funding. I continued to research options and advocate the need. Through my research and our discussions, we discovered Khajiit, and our district is now partnering with Khajiit to bring more community access to these underserved families. So that's just one example. But you really want to focus on that word advocate and how you're from your position, how you can advance your own leadership in those ways. You don't have to be the one in charge of all of it, okay? All right, let's go back here and move forward, because our new focus is going to be on contextualizations. So last month, the major pitfall was people misunderstanding what the criteria actually meant. And this month's pitfall is that the submitter doesn't clearly explain the example and doesn't write a strong contextualization. And when I say the word contextualization, I'm talking about those paragraphs that I was just reading to you on the portfolio. So let me just tell you this. The same person that I was just showing you her portfolio, she is an ISTE certified educator, by the way, now, but there were some examples where she would tell me what it was. She's like, Leanne, here's the criterion I'm thinking about. Here's my example. Do you think this meets? And I'm thinking of one in particular. And I thought, yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I do think that meets. It was actually co-learn with your students, the one we were talking about before, number 13, co-learn. I go, oh yeah, you're a trainer. You are letting your teachers teach you. That's a really good example. Well, she turned her portfolio in and she did not get a meet on that one. And the reason why, in my opinion, is not because it wasn't a good example. It was because she didn't write it clearly and her evaluator didn't get it. Her evaluator didn't see how she was understanding and implementing that criteria. So it's all about writing it up clearly. So you had some pre-work to do with this month. Did anyone do the pre-work where you looked at the contextualizations that I sent? No? Cynthia? Okay.
It's been a couple weeks. I honestly am not sure.
Okay.
If not, did you?
So here's what I'm going to do, you guys. I'm going to put this link in the chat right now. Oh, Nan, did you just put it in the chat? No. Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat. And I want you to go here. And there are 7 examples of contextualizations. What I want you to do is take the next 4 minutes, look at your alignment map, and I'm going to send you the link to the alignment map too. And I want you to see if you can guess what criterion each one of those is writing toward. Because if it's a clearly written contextualization, you should be able to say, boom, that's co-learn with a student. If it's written clearly, you should be able to identify what they're writing for. So I'm going to set the timer for 4 minutes and let you take a stab at that. Cynthia, you can find yours and dig it out and that kind of thing. And I'm going to stop sharing because you have those documents. And actually, I'm going to press pause on the recording. Recording. That probably wasn't enough time either, but I just want to emphasize that if you didn't do this pre-work, again, like everything that I asked you guys to do, like, I don't know, maybe I'm biased, but I think it's like a really good exercise to helping you sort of look at some examples of contextualizations. Every single one on that pre-work assignment, that person passed on that particular number. So you're looking at, you know, they may not be perfect examples, but they're good examples. So here are the answers. Oh, wait, I'm not sharing my screen, am I? Let me share my screen. Here are the answers. The item number is along the left-hand side, and you can see which criterion each one aligns to. If you want to just jot those down real quick and then come back to it later. I think I also have it posted in our online space, but if it's easier for you to just write them down. Jessica, on the few that you did, how well did you do?
I got them. I got 3. I did 3 and I got those 3.
Very good.
I
Tell
was
me
a little
one that you
unsure.
got.
The first one I picked 21 for computational thinking because it flat out said computational thinking.
Okay. What's another one you got?
The first. Number 5 and number 6, the global network. That I stood out to me because I'm wrestling with that one because Cynthia and I had a long debate about being a part of a social network because we don't want to be, but you're forcing us to through the ISTE certification process. And then the learning goals for number 6 for 19.
Okay, so when you say you don't want to be part of a global network, tell me what you mean specifically, like really specifically.
So I'm actually, this is side note, I'm actually have a social media endorsement. I'm actually certified social media marketing. I have a certification in social media marketing. So I know what it takes to market yourself on social media, to really put it out there. Like I know what it takes to become involved in social media. And I did it for a little while and I completely stepped away. I get on it once in a while. I chose not to be a part of that world to an extent. And so when I took this class and I saw that chunk of it, I got a little eye twitch.
Yeah.
I see some benefit. I do see the benefits to social media and I see some
I'm
the
gonna totally cut you
downside.
off right now. Okay, I'm gonna cut you
Right.
off and I'm gonna say this. You can meet this criterion without being on any specific platform.
That would be
So a lot of
great.
people tell me, like, I don't want to be on Twitter. You don't have to be on Twitter. I don't want to have a
Okay.
Facebook account. You don't have to have a Facebook account. Listen, are you, Jessica, are you an ISTE member by chance? Do you know, like like have an ISTE membership?
No, like, no, not other than what we signed up for with the class.
Okay, because if you are an ISTE member, they have PLNs. I'm the co-president of the Digital Citizenship PLNs, and we have our own little discussion board there that anyone who's in the Digital Citizenship PLN can access. So that
Okay.
might be an option for some people, but you do have to have an ISTE membership for that.
Okay.
ASTE, for example, has a discussion board area in their portal. So you don't, if you are averse to being on some of those major social media platforms, I would just encourage you to think about some other options that might make you feel a little bit better about the world. Because I know, I know, and we don't,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. It's not, I mean, I want to push people's boundaries, but there's a limit to where you push people, and it's not past, what they're comfortable with in that realm.
And I'll do it. It's not that I won't do it. It's just, I'm just good not doing it. Like, I was just happy to leave social media. And Cynthia and I were talking about it. Like, we're okay not logging in. So we'll do it to get certified. But it's nice to hear that, because I'd rather do something that, like a professional learning network, where I'll get long-term use out of it rather just to do it for the certification.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So
Okay, I'm going to bring
yeah,
us
that's good
back
to
to the topic of contextualizations now, okay?
okay, thank
So
you.
what I want to know is, when you read those, what I want you to kind of meta think. What are your observations about what makes a contextualization good? What are the qualities of a good contextualization? And I'm going to wait until someone actually says something.
Do you want us to say something or put it in the chat?
No, you can say something.
They were very concise. I mean, they had the key information, but they were concise. It was a nice, neat, tight package.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Cynthia, about how long were they?
Like 2 to 3 short paragraphs,
Mhm.
kind of hitting the key points that were being asked for.
Yep. I usually recommend 6 to 8 sentences. That's not a rule. That's just my personal recommendation. If you get much lengthier than that, it is no longer concise. What else do you notice about what makes a good contextualization? Or what's another quality of being concise? Like, what does that mean?
I'm seeing that you shouldn't, whoever's evaluating, whatever, there's no beating around the bush. You shouldn't keep them guessing. So if they're looking through and skimming, they should be able to see those keywords that match up and key things in the contextualization that match. So if you're kind of going around about it, it's just going to take them longer, and they're just going to say it's not worth it.
Yes.
So it should match. It should be easy to see.
It should be easy to see. And I would say you absolutely do not want to beat around the bush in telling your evaluator precisely how you have met that criterion. I know that as educators, we are very humble people. I mean, we are programmed to be very humble people. And sometimes it is a bit of a challenge for us to be so direct on something like this. I'm going to encourage you to be as direct as possible, because if your evaluator doesn't see it, they're not going to give you the meat. What else do you notice? Anything?
I guess what we pointed out is using the same wording in the standard that you're meeting.
Yes. There's a nuance to that though, and that is a perfect segue into my next slide. Like perfect. So
I was reading the cue cards.
Ryan, I have missed you. I have to say, I've missed your sense of humor.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The bongos that you used to make, Nan and I would text each other and be like, you have to watch Ryan's bongo this week. When you're like mic drops and all that kind of stuff. Okay, I'm getting us back on track, folks. One of the missteps in writing a contextualization is that the submitter only repeats the criterion. So criterion number 12 is collaborate with another educator. And you want to go, so Ryan said a quality of a good contextualization is you repeat the language from the criterion. And I said, yes, to an extent. So if the submitter just says like, I collaborated with this other person over here to do something else, that's not going to be strong enough. You want to go beyond, like, it is good to use the language, but you need to not rely on that. Collaborated is actually a very passive verb. And we want to get more descriptive in terms of what does that collaboration actually look like? Like if you had to paint a picture of the collaboration, what other verbs would you use to back that up? So another example, and I see the same mistake for whatever reason with co-learn all the time, criterion number 13. And the submitter writes a contextualization and talks about, I co-learned with my students about such and such tool. Well, and this is gonna, I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but bear with me. Just because you say you co-learned with your students doesn't mean you actually co-learned with your students in the way that tells the ISTE evaluator that you did. So you really want to describe what that co-learning looked like. You want to remember those things from the criteria guidelines document. Was the tool new to both you and your students? What was the process? And this is what I mean by paint a picture of co-learning. What did that co-learning look like? Did you bring in the box of BBOTs and unwrap them together and unpack the I mean, like, what did the co-learning look like? Right? Or did you invite students to teach you about a new technology tool? You know, did you give them a list of tools you want? Whatever it looked like, you don't want to just say I co-learned. You can use that term, but then you need to unpack it. So how to avoid this misstep is really think about painting a picture for your evaluator. So instead of saying I collaborated with this guy to deliver a PD, this is one that I just kind of came up with out of my head when I thought about someone that I collaborated with recently. So I collaborated with Nancy and Kristen to submit and deliver a conference proposal. So you can see I did repeat the language like Ryan suggested, but then the three of us met via Zoom to determine the vision for our session. Then we set up a Google Doc with each of the submission questions. I took the first stab at filling out the answers. Then Nancy and Kristen did this. We submitted. It was submitted. So you see what I mean about painting a picture of what the collaboration was and looked like. Know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? Okay. Cynthia, how you doing?
Yeah, it feels good.
3 words, criteria guidelines document. That's the thing we were already looking at before with all of those amazing guiding questions. So this is the document you need to reference to make sure that your example is on the right track, but it's also the document that you need to reference to make sure that your contextualization is including those details that will help you to paint a picture. Okay. It's not really a checklist. I think of it more holistically, like what is this criteria guidelines document trying to tell me that the ISTE evaluators are looking for? And then how do I write that story in a very concise 6 to 8 sentence contextualization? Let's see. The other how to avoid this is having a critical friend. And the reason why this is so important, and Cynthia and Jessica, I know that you guys are critical friends. When I say critical friend, I am emphasizing the word critical. It is not going to help your critical friend by saying, this is so good. You wrote this so good. I love it. That's so nice. And as educators, I know we just like, we're you know, we like to encourage people, but on this specific exercise, you want to be a critical friend. You want to poke those holes because you don't want to say this is great. And then your critical friend gets their portfolio back and they get 10 out of 25. So here's the thing about the critical friend. Many times we write contextualizations that make sense to us. You know what I mean? I write what I did, and of course it makes perfect sense to me. I did it. But the true test of a contextualization is, does it make sense to somebody who isn't me and maybe isn't that familiar with my context? And not only does it make sense, but is it hitting the key aspects of that criterion? Or am I talking about a bunch of things besides the point? You know what I mean? Sometimes and I have seen this in so many submitters, they get so excited when they're writing about their practice that they put everything under the sun. So maybe the criterion is about collaborating with another educator, and they start going on about the collaboration on this STEM project, and then they go on to talk about how they learned about STEM and how their parents are so excited that they're teaching STEM and their administrators gave them an award for teaching STEM. And I mean, it's like all of these things, right? And they're very excited, and that's wonderful, but that's not what you want to do in a contextualization. So your critical friend can really help you get concise and specific and help make sure that you align it to the criteria. Okay, some more pro tips are to always use the word I in your contextualization. This is about you. And again, I know as educators, we are trained to give everyone credit, sometimes at the expense of giving ourselves credit. That it's sort of like our culture, right? So I noticed that a lot of people use the word we. Like, we did this lesson, and it's not on the Collaborate standard. It's like on Design a Digital Learning Environment. We set up these Google Classrooms and created this structure for turning in we did this because maybe it was a team, but your team isn't trying to get ISTE certified, you are. And so you need to use the word I. And if your team did something, you can certainly put a sentence about that in your contextualization, but then you have to drill down and talk about what you specifically did to meet the criterion. Because your evaluator is not going to be interested in what your third grade teammate did. Your evaluator wants to know what you did. And if you use the word we, it gets really fuzzy for the evaluator. Okay. You are going to want to state who your students are in the contextualization. If your students are teachers, say that. If Jessica, you're a fourth grade teacher, right?
Third grade.
You're a third grade teacher. Okay, so you can probably, you might not have to state who your students are in every single thing here if all your examples are as you as the teacher to your third grade students. But you might have a different role. You might also deliver training to teachers. I don't know. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But if you do, then for sure, at the beginning of your contextualizations, you'll want to state who your students are in that example. And I can tell you firsthand as an evaluator, I have read some, and I know from looking at the portfolio that this person is a professional developer. But then the example is talking about website design with sixth graders. And I'm like, well, who did that? You don't work with sixth graders, but you're writing about this example with sixth graders, and I don't understand. Not met.
So if I do because sometimes I host staff meetings or things like that, and if I do something in a professional development capacity, as long as I explain that in my contextualization, I'll be okay. But I just have to be clear.
Yeah,
okay.
It's just about being clear. So when you introduce yourself in your portfolio, you'll want to say, I'm a third grade teacher. I also am the site technology something. And sometimes in that role, I present professional development to the staff at my school. And in my portfolio, you'll see examples of me in both roles. And then for those specific ones, you'll want to state who your students are. And you don't have to, again, don't beat around the bush. You can be very clear. In this example, my students are teachers. You can say it as plain as day. I've even just seen it, students : teachers. You don't have to make it flowery or fancy, just clear. I really like at the end of a contextualization to tell your evaluator what the artifact is and what they'll see. So you write this whole thing about how you co-learned with students. It was a new tool to me, and we unboxed it, and we, blah, blah, blah. And I have my thing. And at the bottom, I like to end it with, my artifact is a compilation of photos and student work that show evidence of our learning BBOTs together, whatever your artifact is. I like to end with that so that it gives my evaluator they're in the right headspace to now go look at your artifact, and you've helped them. You've told them what they're going to be looking at. So I like that. And I also recommend wayfinding for them. So for example, if the criterion is, I don't know, something about digital citizenship, you're going to mentor your students in intellectual property. And you have a PowerPoint deck of 40 slides, but the part about intellectual property is on 5 of them. Tell your evaluator what slides to look at for that. Can you see? I mean, this is really an exercise in helping your evaluator see exactly how you've met this. And sometimes, like, the easier you can direct them and make sure that they're looking at what you want them to look at, that they're noticing what you want them to notice, the easier their job is. And they go, oh yeah, I saw those slides, I see the evidence, check, met. Okay. And then just remember that more is not more. We only have 2 minutes and I have so much more to say, and we're not going to get it all done. Remember, more is not more. We talked about this a little bit before. I don't want you to write a dissertation for your contextualization. Because what happens when you do, when you start writing all that, on the evaluator's perspective, here's what happens. I'm reading this whole long thing, and I can't sort out where the actual piece is that I want to read, which is about the criterion. I can't find it in the midst of, and there have been, this cohort didn't have Anna as a facilitator, did they, Nan? No. Okay, Anna's one of our other facilitators, and she was a evaluator for 2 years. She was one of the original evaluators. And the last portfolio that she evaluated was something like 62 pages long, because the contextualizations were all like 3 pages. And she didn't want to read all that. First, she didn't want to read all that. And then she did, because she's a very conscientious evaluator, but in 3 pages of stuff, it's hard to find, like, well, where is the actual place where you explain where you met the criterion? So that's why if you tend to go longer, you tend to put in superfluous details. I don't mean you as in you, I just mean people tend to put in superfluous details. Okay, so now at this point, I had a your turn activity that we're not going to have time to do, but I will post it in the online space so that you can do it on your own. So what this looks like is you have 3 examples of contextualizations. You have one that aligns with 2, one that aligns with 7, and one that aligns with 14. 2 of these passed. One of them did not. And I want you to determine which one did not, and it is based on the contextualization. So I'm going to give you that guessing game. I'm going to post it online for you so you can do it and you can check your answer. I'm going to show you that. Let's see. Here's all that. Here's all that. Let's go to that online space. Okay, so let me just walk you through this navigation again real quick. This is our 2-month checkpoint. So Jessica, for your pre-work, where you would find that would be 2.1 preparation. Is this where you went, Jessica?
Yes, but I thought I was moving maybe a little too fast.
Okay, no problem. You're not on the spot.
I thought what I did with Cynthia was our pre-work. And then I read through some contextualizations on examples on the other page.
Listen, I'm just going to keep you guys busy. So for each one of these
Sure.
checkpoints, you have both pre-work and
Okay.
an assignment. So that's one of the reasons that your assignments are due kind of early on. Like your assignment is going to be due in like 2 weeks, because in 3 weeks, I'm going to give you more pre-work for your next meeting so that you're warmed up to talk about artifacts. Okay, so your pre-work is always the point one, and you'll see the tasks. So you'll see how this goes. Open this document. It contains 7 examples. Determine the criterion. Take some notes about what made it clear. That's exactly what we did tonight. Task 2, if you didn't do this, go into Brightspace and review portfolio examples, because your Brightspace actually has some portfolio examples that you can check out, and that's always good to do. And then submit any questions you want on this form. We answered those. Those were the 2 questions that were submitted. The 2.2 is where you're going to find the Zoom link. You can always find the Zoom link here. It's always the same Zoom link, but this is for our meeting. So again, here's another link to the pre-work. Here's a link to the criteria guidelines document. Here is a link to those 3 things that I just showed you, the your turn activity. There it is right there. 1, 2, 3. What I need to do is post the answer so you can check your work. I'll do that later. And this is where I will post the recording as well. Here is your homework for checkpoint number 2. It is to write some contextualizations. Now that you sort of have a better understanding of what makes a good contextualization, I want you to practice. So what you're going to do is, from your last assignment, you're going to take your 3 to 5 strongest examples, your 3 to 5 strongest greens. Like, remember, because I said, there's no use writing up a not strong example. So I want you to find 5 examples that are strong. I want you to write them. I want you to work with a critical friend to make them even more clear, and then turn them in. What's really important when you turn them in is to remember to label which criterion it's supposed to be matching. There is no template for this, so you can do it in any manner you want to. It might just be as simple as a Word doc or a Google Doc that says criterion 13, and it has your 6 to 8 sentences. Criterion 8, and it has your 6 to 8 sentences. However you want to do that, turn it in. You turn it in right here, and it is due on January 6th. And you know our due dates are ever so slightly squishy. It's not that we won't take it if you get it in after that, but I set these deadlines to keep you moving. I don't want you to wait 3 weeks before doing this assignment. I really don't. We just talked about contextualizations. I want you to practice writing them while this is fresh in your mind. And if you're sticking on schedule, then I'd like you to do this by that date, because the following week, I'm going to send you an email with more pre-work for our next session, right? And if you're like real curious about your pre-work, you can always go in and look at it. It's 3.1. Here's your pre-work for next month. But don't get overwhelmed by that. But you see the pattern of how this thing goes, right? Okay, so that, I guess, summarizes where we are. Let's just take a look at our schedule real quick. Last month was our lesson on criteria. Tonight was our lesson on contextualizations. Next month, we will talk about artifacts. That date is January 14th at 4 o'clock. It shouldn't, Wyoming time and Arizona time is the same right now. Yeah, next time we're going to talk about artifacts. Your 4th lesson is going to be more of a workshop, because you'll have more stuff done by then, and we're going to come together and we're just going to talk about stuff that you have done. And I'm going to give you some feedback. And then our 5th session is like, because you submit a month later. So your 5th lesson is going to be where I talk about tying everything up in a bow, getting your alignment map ready for submission, and making sure you have all the pieces in the right places and polished up and ready to go. So that's our sequence. What questions do you guys have? Questions, comments, wonderings, or whatnot?
So I would imagine I need to go into week or month one and do the assignment and the pre-work and that, is that?
I mean, I would recommend it. You have to keep in mind, this whole webinar series for the portfolio, this is something that we contracted with Wyoming, because usually in ISTE Cert, people are like, once you get out of the online modules, you have 6 months to do your portfolio and you're kind of on your own. It's like an independent exercise. Some of the trainers will do some things and some of them won't. And but it really is officially an independent exercise. But we agreed with Wyoming that we would provide support to help you figure out how the heck to develop a portfolio. But these are all optional, self-paced, there's support. So there's nothing about the assignments and the recordings, Ryan, that are like required. I recommend them, but because I may be biased because I do them. I don't know. But I mean, I try to really provide assignments and tasks that will help you understand and kind of scaffold that process from how do I know I have good examples to how do I write them clearly to how do I think about the artifacts. So yes, and you would go into 1 month checkpoint 1.1. There's the session 1 recording for your cohort. And in 1.3, there's instructions for your assignment, and there is a template that you can open up. And I'm sure if you got it in even now, I'm sure Nan I'm sure she would look at it for you.
Ryan, I would highly recommend that color coding assignment. It was really, really good. So I think that if you didn't want to do everything, that would be the most beneficial. Oh, go ahead and eat. That would be the most beneficial. I kind of groaned about it at first.
Yeah, it was not fun
Cynthia
to
and I
get
both
started.
did, and then we went through it and we're like, whoa, we're so glad we did that.
Worth the time spent.
Yeah,
And
it sounds like it.
Cynthia and I would adopt you into our critical friend group.
Yeah, if you need a
I'm sure
critical
if you want
friend,
to.
we'll
Yeah,
adopt you.
we can
Well,
be a triangle of critical friends if you would like to be.
I don't mean to be weird, but I've been looking for a critical friend for a while.
We just started, and we've had 1 critical friend session over the color coding, so you can join us if you would like.
That's fantastic. I love it. Yeah, no, I mean, I think in this process, it might help if I had friends.
A critical friend or 2.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, ladies. Yeah, I think that might be beneficial to do that.
And it's really nice when Cynthia all of a sudden messaged me like, hey, we're supposed to get this done. And I'm like, oh crap, yeah, that's right. So having that critical friend has been very beneficial.
You know what? It's really hard. I think it's very difficult to have 6 months to do something, right? Because it's easy to put off. It's easy to put off. But it is 6 months because it's literally a 6-month process. So I think for me, it's like, are there people who wait until month 5 and just bust their butt and do it? Absolutely. And some of those people have been successful. But again, for me, if I just found out in month 5 that I had 7 or 8 reds, I'd be freaking out about what I was going to do about that. So, if you are able to kind of keep with the timeline of this thing, awesome. And if you miss a month and then you have to kind of do 2 months worth of stuff in another month, that's okay. But as much as you can, I wouldn't put it off. If you do have to put it off, all the stuff is there. So if you're a binger and you just want to do it all in a month, it's all there for you. Okay, any other questions? I'm going to actually, well, no, I won't stop the recording if there's other important questions.
I'll just send Ryan, I'll just send you my information in the chat, but just to you. So it's not, I don't know if chats are